All right, everybody, welcome. Welcome to the Zoom after show. And as everybody gets settled, I will let you all inside and make sure that I am showing the right. There we go. Let's let a few people in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And I think we're good. Hello, everybody, my friends.
Hey, we got a good turnout today, it looks like.
What's up, Tom, Seth?
Hey, Joseph Dumont, how are you doing, man?
How are my friends on this fine day?
Everybody's good, right? We're all good. We all look
can I
good.
just tell you something?
Good to see you, buddy. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Good to see you guys.
I just want to tell you, Jen, by the way, you invited me to, like, I don't know, Jen's little black book or something like that, and I couldn't find the link on Facebook.
I couldn't either, dude, so I tried.
I will like it. I will join it. I will do what you need, but just send me the link. I'm going to turn it over to you guys, but, you know, it's quite clear that if Eric was to ask me to introduce, okay, Wendy, you're not there, you're gone. If Eric was asking me to introduce him to my three people, my network, it would have to be you guys, and I think he might run a mile. But, you know, it is what it is. You have become my network.
We're pleased to be that. Thanks for the show today. Good stuff, Eric.
Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, you know what? Eric. Appreciate everyone sticking around, and hopefully there were a couple little unique insights over the last hour.
Oh yeah, I mean the neurons were firing, man. The synapses were developing. I mean, in this time of such chaos and turmoil, to think about how we can take charge of our own work experience, whatever it might be, and how we can bring our best to it and what we should expect from it. It's really important stuff to think about right now. I believe a lot of people just feel themselves to be in kind of a victim mode and to be just scrambling to try to make the best of a terrible situation, but to kind of use the opportunity to rethink work generally, I think is a really good thing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, look, I think that the future is either something that we sort of default into, or it's something that we can more intentionally create. It's our choice.
Yeah, and you're onto a topic I think that's so important, and more CEOs are understanding the importance of what you're talking about today than I think ever before. You know, and it may have some little shifts with the Business Roundtable from moving away from just money for stockholders to more of the stakeholder thing. One of my friends just had a book come out called The Conscious Leader. And he's talking about, I'm just reading the pages right before I came on the show today, reading the pages about love and appreciation for the people we work with. So you've really found a really important topic and something that is hopeful in our time. I think people will listen to your recommendations in a way that they may not have 20 years ago.
I think, you know, and the conscious leader, I think is, you know, right what we need to be talking about. The difficulty with the conversation is the tangibility of it. You know, given how many variables there are when it comes to creating great teams and profitable organizations, the conscious leader and how you can isolate that conscious leader to enable more effective teams. It's difficult to do, something that needs to be done. But the balance that I'm always faced with is how do you take these concepts or what might seem to be these platitudes and implement them into a more effective reality, you know, in the short, medium, and long term. And I think that when we talk about words like love and trust and camaraderie and belonging, you know, the sentiment is there and well understood, but the action I think is more difficult to take, because I think it starts by being a little bit more introspective and understanding what makes sense for us first. I mean, I think we probably all heard that you can't lead others until you're able to lead yourself. Now, the problem is then how do you take a non-business conversation around mental health and around personal well-being and then take that to, you know, an AGM or sort of an industry association conversation and say that, you know, look, we need to look at this thing from 30,000 feet, not from here's the 10 steps to success that I think, you know, is very well intended and works in many ways, but is not necessarily the approach that I'm taking to the same conversation.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Hey, Eric, I have a question for you. I spent most of my career in the world of advertising, specifically on the agency side.
Okay.
And we took hiring maybe as serious as you possibly could, because teammates on a creative team are so important, not just for the output, but you know, you have creative people, you have technical people, you have project managers, you have client services, you have strategy folks. And every time we found a good candidate, we had them interview with each team member that they were going to work on. So if it was a, let's just say I was a pod for the Verizon business, and then we had some for the Capital One business, each individual had to kind of, you know, it was a democratic hiring process. And I would bring in, if I was hiring a new person, I would say, hey, you guys, I found this really great candidate. I want you to meet them. And we would decide democratically if we liked it. And so I have no experience outside of that, really. So my question is that, have you ever worked with the agency world? And if so, is there anything you see that they do that is unique on that team building? Because, you know, it wasn't just, diversity was more important on a creative team than I think anything that's ever worked. So our creative director, if you have someone who's gay, if you have someone who's Black, if you have someone who's Hispanic, if someone who's LGBT of any kind, if you have someone who grew up poor, I mean, just like, you have to have diversity on a creative team, or you can't produce a proper story for a brand. And is there anything that you take from that type of experience, and then, you know, how that...
From the agency side of things too, you're not just looking for fit amongst the team, you're looking for fit with the client as well.
Correct.
I mean, you know, what you're looking for Coca-Cola is going to be different than Capital One, is going to be different than Ford or GM. And I think that when you're looking to build that team, you're not just looking for fit, but you're looking for a language too. And I'm not talking like French, English, German, Spanish. I'm talking about, you know, do you speak the client and the agency language that is so important? Now, I think that the same can be true when you're looking for hiring someone for the finance team. Do they speak the jargon and the language of our team? Now, the difference is, if you can speak finance, you can likely speak finance from Amazon to Facebook to Ford to Coca-Cola to Capital One. You speak that language. But from the advertising, from the creative, from the agency side of things, you have to speak a different language depending on each of the clients that you're working with. So I think that there's an extra step of the recruiting process in terms of fit, and I mean fit in terms of approach, that you would have to take when you're looking to hire for the agency side of things too.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I only jumped in at the end of the show, sorry, but did you like hit on ageism at all?
We didn't talk about ageism. No. Is there a specific question that you have?
Well, you know, it's a huge problem, and you know, the intergenerational workforce is the ideal and what we're always accustomed to, because it was never a problem. But now ageism, because of the longer lifespans, because, you know, people are learning longer, which is relevant to what you were talking about, where people are learning longer, you know, the average age of going into a university or whatever. But ageism is a very big problem. And now with so many more people basically reinventing themselves, right? This is like the super buzzword of what everybody is doing, you know, I'm reinventing myself, especially as you get over 50, because you have to reinvent yourself, because you don't really, you know how to fit in anywhere. I mean, is that a whole nother book, or is that something you can talk about?
It's a whole nother book. Admittedly, it's not my book, the direction that I'm going. But, you know, I'll share with you that, it certainly is an issue. You know, I think that when we look, that there are a lot of isms that are a big issue right now. And I think that that's part of the learning process of the future of work too. I mean, with the Black Lives Matter movement that's happening, I think that that's an education process too, and something that we're learning as a society to start to figure out. I think that the workforce is starting to learn a little bit more about what an aging workforce might look and feel like. Alternatively, we're starting to learn what, I'm not going to say an uneducated workforce might look like. I'm saying an alternatively educated workforce might look like. Now that we're not requiring university degrees like we have in the past, we're looking at some informal educational streams. You know, it's a whole new way of looking at things. Now, I'll tell you that I've both been aged in and out of speaking opportunities and client opportunities. I've been aged out, I know for sure, out of board opportunities because I didn't have the experience that somebody, you know, twice my age might have. And so I think it's an issue both ways. And now, to be honest, I know for a fact that last week I got white mailed out of a speaking opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
Now,
exactly.
there are multiple ways that I can take this. You know, I can get up on my soapbox and say that, you know, I should have been picked. You know, it was my spot to get. Or now, if there are fewer white males that are going to be picked in the interest of diversity, inclusion, equity, and equality, which great, then I better be one of the best white males to be chosen,
Right.
Or else I'm not going to get that job.
Right.
And that's the approach that I'm taking. If I'm not working on my craft, on my skill set, if I'm not continuing to learn, unlearn, and relearn every day of the week in one way, shape, or form, this doesn't mean reading textbooks or otherwise, then I'm going to start to fall behind. And either I can complain about it or I can get with it. And that's the only way that I think I'll retain now the fewer spots that are going to white males. And I'll say rightfully so.
I think Gen Z is awesome. You know, I think Gen Z is completely going to change the future of building more of an intergenerational work culture, because we have to do it moving forward, or else, you know, everybody gets old. You get old. Everybody ages, right? You can't not fix the problem now and start looking at that problem, because it's only going to get worse and really exponentially grow.
Can I challenge you on that?
Uh-huh.
Not to suggest that Gen Z is not going to be great, but I'm going to ask Joseph, Tom, both Josephs. I'm going to ask everyone, between which years, without looking it up, between which years were millennials born? Tom, I'm going to come to you first. Do you know?
I have no idea. I have no idea. I've never really paid
know the
attention
answer.
to the.
I know the answer.
Okay, Wendy, what do you think?
1981 to 1991.
Okay, Joseph, is that your answer too?
Yeah, well, 1980 was the initial year. So, for example, 2020, they're turning 40.
Oh, wow.
Okay, and Steve, did you have a thought on that, or Seth?
I'm like Tom. I don't understand any of those
Generational labels.
wordy
Right?
things. I don't.
Yeah.
In marketing, you have to understand it. But anyway.
Well, here's the thing, to Wendy and to anyone else, you know, I've looked at, you know, PwC, at Goldman Sachs, at Syzygy, at Nielsen Research. I've looked at the Census Bureau. I've looked at the dictionary. And the truth is, none of those different research bodies have the same definition for what a millennial is. So I'm not saying that anyone on the call is wrong. I'm just saying that we don't really know actually what right is. I think the sooner we start to blanket and generalize a generation, which, you know, in America's case might be 80 to 160 million people, depending on what the definition of a millennial is, we start to grossly misunderstand who these people are, what they value.
Wait, you do it all the time with boomers. Boomers are a 20-year segment of the population.
Well, you're
generalizing
a generation to say that they do it with boomers. No, I mean, a couple people might.
There's one thing that I did read, which I thought was really insightful, which is that, you know, and that's how I know the data point, which is 2020. I mean, this was obviously like, you know, said in 2019 because the whole pre-COVID, but in 2020, the first of the millennials will turn 40. And what the actual study showed is that millennials started to resemble all consumers when they went through life stages and life changes. So getting married, having a child, getting a job. What was happening is the actual badge of millennial didn't apply anymore because they were going through the same hopes and fears and dreams and decision-making cycles. The decision-making cycle as to getting a mortgage for a home or a first home, you know, or having a kid. There wasn't a millennial way of having a kid versus a non-millennial. It was like having a kid. These are the things that I need to think about as well. Now, sure, there might be some differences. For example, maybe there is a different generational need to take out life insurance, for example, earlier versus later, as in, you know, I'm invincible, I'm invulnerable, I'll live forever. But for the most part, the actual study showed that there were no differences and that it was actually a fool's errand to generalize and say millennials this and Gen X this and Gen Z that. It helps for us as marketers, but it's also one of the biggest pitfalls that, it's one of the biggest pitfalls that we've made, right? Which is the one size fits all. Why? Because of mass marketing, mass media, mass merchandising, and all the masses. And as we've all learned, the more we can segment and it requires more work, but it almost always reaps some kind of rewards. And I suppose going back to what you were saying, Eric, we tend to, of course, generalize and create these stereotypes and these generalizations when recruiting, and it doesn't necessarily lead to the best person for the job.
If you ask me, we started to label a millennial because we started to get a little bit lazy and cut a couple corners. If we really wanted to understand, who the right person was, we wouldn't say that it's a millennial. It's a certain individual that has a certain value set that aligns with the people that are working here. And that would be of any age, really. I think you made the point. I don't think people change from generation to generation. I think the world around us absolutely does.
Yeah, it's cultural.
People come of age, every year we've ever lived. And I think that when we look at the technological advancements of the world around us, then people will act accordingly.
Right. Well, but generations typically, they really, because I question the same thing. It's like, why do you have to put
as soon as you say typically, then you're going to be wrong a lot of the time too. And I don't think that we can generalize that.
Okay, I won't say typically, but a generation starts at a certain year and ends at a certain year, right? This is just how it's looked at. And I would question that. I was questioning it 5 years ago. And now it's like, well, why do we do that? Why are the boomers this vast generation that it's like, I'm 65, but I don't relate to somebody that's 80, but yet we're
you're
still
the one who's
of the same
subscribing to the
generation.
generational norms.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
No, I'm explaining myself.
The one thing that interests me about all this, about segmentation, I understand why marketers do it. I understand why cultural commentators do it. It can be a great convenience, but it can be a source of great confusion too. I remember the first time I ever tried to take one of the personality tests, one of the classic personality tests. And every question I would say to myself, well, on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I'm like that, but on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I just finally had to give up. It was the Myers-Briggs, and I just couldn't take it because nothing seemed to fit, and it's a little bit like that with our generational categories that make for sort of expansive, glib conversation. But if we don't carve correctly, if we don't segment correctly, we confuse ourselves more than we enlighten ourselves with these things. And it's a funny thing how this comes back to, like, Wendy, you first mentioned ageism, and Eric, you too, about we're talking about racism and we're talking about sexism, and there are a lot of other prejudices that are structurally embedded in systems as well. Like, for example, if I were a young white man and go to a .com company, a tech company, and I interview and everybody looks like me, and I think, oh man, this would be a great fit. I'm just making it worse, right? The homogeneity, the sameness. But if on the other hand, I go into a company where nobody looks like me and I say, well, this is great. I can be a champion of diversity here. I can really change this place. I just finished reading Sinclair Lewis's famous novel, Main Street, where a young woman goes into a prairie town and decides she's going to change the whole town, to make it a better place. And the novel is really about the impossibility of doing that. And I think a lot of us, when we want to champion change in places that are very different from us, very homogeneous in their own ways, we run up against these problems. So there are a lot of dilemmas in the air right now. And Eric, I feel what you were saying. I mean, I got a couple calls from speakers bureaus in Washington last year that said to me, we've had 2 calls this month from people who want you as a speaker, but they say, but do you have a woman who can do his talk? And it's like, I'm celebrating the final discovery of diversity on stages around the world, right? Where it's always been old white men, basically, for such a long time, and then expanded to younger white men. But then we got to expand so much more. But of course, I'm in the wrong category for all those things. But hey, I had my run, so I kind of celebrate it. But you do wonder what it will take to get us to being a society where we don't have to face these artificial segmented barriers.
Yes, because they really do exist.
Yeah, that are not ultimately conducive to great community and great experiences at work. So you brought up, not just explicitly today, Eric, but you've brought up some issues that ramify out into all kinds of other issues that are really important for us to think about. So, and that's what often happens here, you know.
Yeah, I just want to come back to Wendy. First of all, Tom, I agree with everything you're saying, and Wendy, I don't want to be, you know, abrasive or suggest that what you're saying isn't wrong or rude. That's not what I'm trying to do. And if that's Eric, the case, I apologize. Yeah, I just think that a lot of the differences that you say you've got that are from, let's just say, what a traditional boomer stereotype might be, I think are going to be your competitive advantage and the differentiator that ultimately sets you apart. And that, you know, in any case, for any generation, I try and lean against all the millennial stereotypes that I shouldn't have in order to set me apart from what I'm supposed to be as a millennial. And I think that that's what's ultimately tried to, you know, I'm trying to break those generalities of what a generation is supposed to be.
I think promoting, working together, sharing each other's wisdom, building intergenerational workforces, and this really beautiful culture moving forward, it's kind of our responsibility. I feel as though, as being 65 years old, it is my responsibility to say, hey, there's a problem here. Is there a way we can solve it, work together, and then grow this beautiful culture in the workplace? That's really where I'm coming from. But, you know, Tom, you say you could get in front of somebody, you go in and you say, yeah, let's let me share my wisdom with you. Yeah. And then you're kind of like, the problem is you can't even get in the door to make that little speech, right? Yeah. It's really difficult. It's just, you can't even get in the door to say, let me share that wisdom.
And the great irony is, when I was 28, I literally, this is the truth, I was directing a seminar for the National Endowment for the Humanities when I was like 28 or 29, and everybody was in their 50s or 60s. And I thought, man, I wish I was in my 60s, you know, so I would have this gravitas, you know. And now that I'm in my late 60s, I kind of wish I was 29 again, so I would have that energy, right? But we have to learn how to incorporate. The cool thing about getting older is that we've never really shed those younger parts of ourselves. And as we were talking about a few minutes ago, the younger generations are going through these seminal events that are consciousness shaping. And we've had all those of us who are older, we've had so many of those events in our lives. And if we can figure a way to bring that to bear on what we do in a way that's really distinctive, then we're not shuttled aside, right? We're not shoved aside. It's only when we try to really sit on our laurels of the past that we render ourselves, you know, kind of superfluous to what's going on now. So, I mean, these are fascinating discussions.
So Eric has to jet in about 4 minutes, but, you know, I was thinking if there's a way to synthesize the conversation between Eric and myself, and then the after show, it's almost like it's a red herring to be discussed. We can discuss and debate the future of work in terms of hybrid, in terms of the pod behind me, in terms of telecommuting, virtual. But ultimately, a lot of the fundamentals come down to maybe two things. If I had to like pause this, one is making sure that it's the right fit from the get-go, and that is a two-way street, right? Employee to employer, employer to employee. And the second is this the search for and this commitment to happiness. And creating happiness within the environment, because it doesn't matter, you know, whether you are in fact in that AT&T retail outlet in Mexico or in corporate. If you are with people that are like you and you can find that commonality, you can make it work, and you can maximize the opportunity. And I think that is an uplifting message, because the flip side of it is you know, it's easy to stereotype and generalize, because we have to say work sucks, this sucks, this, you know, etc. But the reality is the tapestry is so interwoven and so complex and so granular. There's so many different companies, you know, to your point, Eric, in so many different countries or states or towns, in departments, that to be able to say one size fits all is, you know, it's not that it's dangerous or lazy, but it's just not that accurate. And I think maybe the future of work says, hey, life is what you make it. Work is what you make it, if you are committed to making the most of it.
No, I think that's Well summarized. Absolutely.
So I know you got a dash. If anyone wants to have any final greeting, salutations, commiserations, whatever you want. Eric, thank you for being a part of this. I will send you an email with a bunch of links and connections. And as I always say, you know, like Ryan Campbell's been back a bunch of times, you are always most welcome to Zoom bomb us and drop in any day of the week. In fact, Tom, you know, this is my standard line. Tom was one of my guests that came, you know, recommended to me through the same Speakers Bureau that recommended Ryan. And now, you know, he's part of, he is, you know, one of my three. When
my wife locked my study door from the outside, so I'm here with Joseph every day pretty much now.
Love that. Well, thanks everyone for joining today. I really appreciate your time and look forward to keeping connected.
Great to see you. Great to see you, Eric. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you. And I'm just to those of you watching on YouTube, thank you. And I will stop the recording.